Dave's over there getting the coal to even up his fletching feathers. What he's doing is he's got his coal.
Oh, that's what I'm smelling.
Creating funk. I did not realize that was the part of the problem.
And you do all brain tanning.
Doing brain tanning. You want me to give you a spiel on
Sure.
what brain tanning is? Is that what? It's a Stone Age method of tanning hides where you use the brains of the animal to make the leather soft. Brains are basically an emulsified fat, so in the process you're essentially breaking down the glue in the hide and replacing it with oil from the brains. What I've been demonstrating is the dry scrape method. This hide has had most of the hair and the outer epidermis removed from it. The outer epidermis is the shiny layer that you see on a lot of leather. It's the waterproofing layer, and it's the layer of skin that produces a lot of the glue. It's also the layer of skin that makes drum heads really nice and gives it a good tone. It's the strength to the hide. By removing that, you get the suede-like or the chamois cloth kind of finish that you have on a brain tan deer skin. So
Clothes.
you start by
Clothing.
yeah, for clothes. Yeah, it makes it feel good against your skin. So by removing that hair and the outer epidermis, it allows the brain oil to pass all the way through the fibers of the hide. So once you get that scraped off, then you would take the hide and put it into a solution of brains and water. All mammals have enough brains in their head to tan their own hide. Again, it's just an emulsified fat. Once that hide is submerged down into that, it will absorb the brain oil. And you wring it out, open the pores of the skin up by pulling it and stretching it, put it back into the brains, and you'll wring it like that 2 or 3 or 4 times. Then you work the hide dry by pulling and stretching and working these fibers. And when you're pulling and stretching that hide, what you're doing is preventing those fibers from sticking together again when it dries, so that they don't set up again and get stiff like a piece of rawhide. After you have it completely softened and completely dry by pulling and stretching, you'll have a soft piece of buckskin. It will be white. If that hide gets wet, you've got to do all that work pulling and stretching again in order to make it soft. So the way to finish it is to smoke it, which gives it the tan color of the hides down in the basket. Smoking it you do by sewing 2 hides together or folding one in half and stitching it all the way around, leaving a hole in the bottom. Dig a hole in the ground, get a good bed of coals going in there. You can sew a tube of cloth onto the bottom of this, put some rotten wood or punky wood down on top of those coals. It will make a lot of smoke but not a lot of flame. You got your hides hanging above that, you can put that tube of cloth right over that hole. The smoke will come up into your hides like a hot air balloon. Fill it up, and it forces that smoke to go through the fibers of the hide. What's happening again is that the carbon is coating those fibers and prevents them from sticking together again when the hide gets wet. So then you've got a usable piece of fabric that can be made into clothing, traditionally moccasins, leggings, breech clouts, dresses, shirts, coats, bags, pouches, anything we use modern day fabric for. But then you can wash it, lay it out flat like you would a wool sweater and let it dry, and it will stay soft.
Okay. Is this all deer?
Most everything I have here is deer. Some of these bones are elk. This is an elk bone and an elk bone to show the difference in the size of an elk and a deer. I believe that these fish hooks are made out of buffalo, sheep's wool, and porcupine quill and moose hair decoration on the knife sheets.
Okay.
Otherwise, all of it's deer. Got an alligator bone handle here, and then this is a shell scraper, just to show prior to hard metals that you could, you're doing stone scrapers or shell scrapers, working things like that on a dry scrape hide.
If you're not going to tan the hide right away, if you want to preserve it, what do you do?
What do you do? Well, you take it off the deer first, and you can put it right into a freezer. You can flesh it and salt it and keep it stored in airtight, like plastic drums, 5-gallon buckets or 55-gallon barrels, depending on how many hides you have. Or you can flesh it, stretch it, and dry it, and then roll it up and keep it somewhere out of the damp and away from bugs.
And then come back and oil it later?
Well, then you can get it back out at any point. If you have frozen it, then you would just pull it back out of the freezer, flesh it, put it in a frame, and proceed with your steps from there. If you have salted it, then you would probably use the hide for wet scrape. I don't like using salted hides for dry scrape for 2 reasons. One, salt is osmotic, so it will hold moisture in the hide and not allow it to dry all the way. And then when it doesn't dry all the way, your tool will not scrape evenly on the hide and will cause washboarding. Secondarily, salt in a dry scrape hide leaves particles, the little salt crystals in there, and it will dull your tool faster. And when you're dry scraping, this is a really sharp edge that you want to keep while you're working the hide. So if I have salted hides, I tend to wet scrape those. And basically the same process in hide tanning, except with wet scrape you're taking the hide from the animal, soaking in a lye solution made with wood ashes and water, and then putting it on a fleshing beam and removing the hair and the outer epidermis that way, as opposed to doing it dry.
This is what you were doing earlier over here?
Well, this hide has been brained, and I was just opening the pores up on it so it absorbed the water better so that I could soften it today, which because it's raining really won't happen because the humidity can't get out of the hide into the air to actually dry properly. So I was just opening pores up, but it's the same process. When you saw me scraping, that's the same procedure that you would be using if you're going to wet scrape a hide. And I think the other one was dry. Of course, if you dried the hide, you can just rehydrate it and put it into a frame and stretch it. You got to work the backside of it to get those fibers open back up all the way so the hide will stretch properly and evenly in your frame.
How long does that have to stay on that frame like that?
Oh, you know, it depends on the weather. If you've got a dry, sunny day, you can put it in a frame and it can be dry and ready to scrape in anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. If it's a day like this, I would just let it keep hanging there. This is absorbed. It hasn't been out in the rain, but it's damp because it has absorbed moisture from the air, and so that moisture that's in the hide won't let me scrape it properly. If I try to scrape with the dry scrape tool, I might get some of that off, but it's going to eat the hide up and create some of that washboarding, which can turn to holes later.
All right. Get a look at these real quick. So you got some skulls down here too.
I do, just a couple now. I had some more out yesterday. I've got a bear, a deer, and that's a cow. Elk scapula.
Just the bear here?
It is.
He wasn't too big, was he?
Mm-mm.
All right, well I appreciate it.
You are quite welcome.
Do you have a website or anything like that where you do this? Or you just want to tell us what
And
it
I'd
is?
love a link also.
Okay.
If you're putting videos like this, it's always fun to get to see that.
Well, I know about you guys, River Cane and
River Canyon Falling Leaves Rendezvous.
Right.
Yep, I sat on the board there, and we've got that week after next, or starting next weekend actually.
then you got another one in
our spring
October. That's
event.
Falling Leaves,
We do,
right?
yeah. So come up and join us for that one.
All right.
I teach brain tending there. I teach soap making. I teach felting, cheese making, women's fire making. I've done paints and pigments. I work on a small dairy goat farm and have some experience in organic farming also. So I do,
You do it all, huh?
consulting work there, yeah. So in addition to primitive skills, I like to play on a farm.
All right. Well, I'll put some links to that too as well. What's your